For decades ago, a young man named Chris embarked on an adventurous journey. He found himself in Alaska, drawn by the allure of its mysterious, untouched nature. However, his main goal was to find gold, and he was mining there with a small group of fellow enthusiasts. They often stayed together but occasionally ventured out alone, though this was a risky move. One day, while his companions were staying behind in the cabin to rest due to illness, Chris decided to go for a short trip despite the danger. This outing would lead him into an encounter with a wild predator rather than the riches he sought. As Chris trekked through the snow, he found himself 2 kilometers away from camp, nearing a riverbed, when something unusual caught his eye. A large dog appeared to be wandering in the wilderness. Chris, surprised by the sight of a lone dog, assumed it might be lost or its owner might be nearby. However, the dog's behavior was aggressive, which caused Chris to approach cautiously. As he got closer, Chris realized that what he had mistaken for a big gray dog was actually a huge wild wolf. The wolf, upon noticing Chris, growled menacingly, showing its teeth. Faced with no clear escape, Chris closed his eyes, bracing for an attack. However, when he opened them again, he noticed something unexpected. The wolf was trapped in a poacher's snare. And to his surprise, it wasn't just any wolf. It was a mother wolf. Chris recognized that the animal was in desperate need of help, but the she-wolf was hesitant, clearly not wanting him near her. The situation was tense, and Chris could feel the weight of the decision before him. He was alone in the wilderness with no backup, and there were other risks like the possibility of nearby wolves. He had to act quickly, but he wasn't sure what to do. Should he leave the wolf to suffer, or could he find a way to help? Realizing the wolf's pups might still be alive, Chris decided to search for them. The prince led him deeper into the snow, away from the safety of his camp. He fought against his fear as he followed the tracks, walking for kilometers before eventually finding the den where the pups were hiding. The small wolves were frightened and tried to hide at the sight of Chris, but he didn't have time to hesitate. He quickly placed the pups into his bag and began the long journey back. The trip back to the mother was filled with anxious moments, with the pups whining and struggling in the bag. By the time he reached the mother wolf, she had likely sensed the presence of her pups, and Chris carefully untied the bag, letting the pups rush to her. They immediately began nursing, and the mother wolf watched Chris closely, still wary of him. Chris attempted to help the mother wolf out of the trap, but she continued to growl at him whenever he got too close. Despite this, he remained nearby, offering small pieces of meat, but she refused to eat, likely suspicious of his intentions. Chris stayed with the wolf family until nightfall, and then he returned to his camp, keeping the encounter to himself. The next day, he went back to the wolf, bringing more food. Over the following days, he continued to feed the mother, though she still growled at him. But something changed. As the days passed, the pups began to trust Chris, even jumping around him and licking his hands. The mother wolf, however, remained cautious, calling her pups to her whenever Chris got too close. But eventually, Chris saw a small sign of trust. The mother wolf wagged her tail slightly. With this, Chris moved cautiously and, after a long, tense moment, managed to open the trap, setting the mother wolf free. She quickly ran a few meters away and called her pups to follow her, disappearing into the forest with her family. Chris never saw them again. A week later, he returned to his home in Jersey, where he seldom spoke of the experience, as most people found it hard to believe. 5 years later, Chris found himself back in Alaska, working for a finishing company. On one of his trips, his snowmobile broke down halfway to a neighboring village. Stranded in the cold, he tried unsuccessfully to repair it, and as night began to fall, he realized he was surrounded. Suddenly, a dark silhouette emerged, and Chris soon realized he was being watched by a pack of wolves. As they encircled him, fear gripped his heart. Chris had no way of escaping. He counted 5 wolves closing in, and his fear deepened as he felt his life slipping away. Then, one wolf approached him, stopping just a couple of meters away. Chris froze, locking eyes with the animal. To his amazement, it was the same mother wolf from years earlier, older now, with duller fur but unmistakably the same. For a moment, they stared at each other. Then, the mother wolf gave a small wag of her tail, signaling to the pack. The wolves turned and retreated into the forest, and Chris was left unharmed. He eventually made it to the village, but the encounter remained with him. Chris had saved the lives of a wolf and her pups years before, and now it seemed the wolf had returned the favor.